Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. So we're going to go there. Okay, good. No, I'm so honored to be sharing. I think I have that last Sunday before vacation feeling going on a little bit, so I'm about to leave you for just a little bit. Reverend Karen is going to be here next week to complete our World Religion series that we've been doing in July. I will be back in 2 weeks to start our August talks, but I wanted to just share with you a little bit of my process. And I've told this before, when we decide what we're going to teach on or share on Sunday mornings, this is weeks and even months in advance, and like, oh, that'll be good. Yeah, I'm interested in that. And I'm always surprised, well, often surprised that I get to like the time to really start preparing it. It's like, wow, that's perfect. That's exactly what we need right now, and I've got a lot of energy about it. And then sometimes, like this morning, as I'm preparing for this one, I was like, I really thought I could talk about Hinduism and Buddhism in one 20-minute talk and like give it anything possibly useful for these ancient traditions that are so rich and complex and deep. What can I possibly say that will be of any use? So it has been an interesting sermon preparation week, I'll just tell you that. And but it's good. I'm going to talk. I've got something to say. But I can't give much of the depth of it. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to give you like the biggest, highest 50,000-foot view, just some of the history of these two great faith traditions. And then I'm just going to pick something that speaks to my heart today that I think might be useful from each of these that relate to us in unity, the way we see God and the world, and that might just be applicable in our times. Does that sound like a plan? All right, thank you. So we're going to talk about Hinduism and Buddhism. I'm calling this message the gifts from the East. And as I mentioned, these are ancient and complex systems. And so I didn't know if I was going to talk about the 4 yogic paths or the eightfold path of Buddhism, the noble eightfold path. So I just decided, well, how many of these little numbered things are there? There's the noble eightfold path. There is the path to awakening, the path to purification in the Theravada tradition. There are the 6 paramitas, the 5 paths, and the 10 bhumis. There are the 4 purities, the 4 yogas of Mahamudra Zen, and the 2 entrances and the 4 practices. Yeah, you see what I'm up against, right? You get a sense of it. It's a lot. Sometimes we just want to simplify it. We want to just simplify our beliefs and our understanding. And so I saw Twitter is always good for that. Just like, reduce it to something that is just so like, how many characters is it? 146. And I saw somebody on Twitter said, I no longer believe in Taco Tuesdays. It's getting very spiritual and very, kind of controversial. I don't believe in Taco Tuesdays. I believe in taco every days. So I don't know if we're going to get quite that simple. Hinduism began 4,000 years ago, thereabouts. It's about 15% of the world's population. It's one of the few great religions that has no founder. There's not a single historical figure that is called the founder of Hinduism. It came from a collection of beliefs and practices in India at that time, and then over time, something began to accrete, something began to come together that had substance and solidity to it. There's a great misunderstanding about the multiple deities in Hinduism, that, those people that worship, hundreds of gods and all that. I want to say that too, that's actually not the core philosophical understanding, is that there is one God that has infinite expressions. And each of these expressions of Brahma is in some way an invitation to know God a little differently. There's a story or a scene depicted in the book of Revelation in the Christian Bible that says that the cherubim and the seraphim circle the throne of God, and at each turn they find something new to praise God for all eternity. That's what we're talking about with Hinduism. That all of these paths of worship and devotion are each describing, there's something in God we never knew before. We are so blessed in this city of Houston to live in the most religiously diverse city in the nation. Did you know that? And we have a large population from South India, or from India, yes, thank you. South Asia, I meant to say. And so we have members of our own community who are Hindu, and they have shared some of their faith tradition, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful richness that we have here. Buddhism is a daughter religion of Hinduism. As last week we talked about Judaism being the parent of Christianity and Islam, that Hinduism, from that came the Buddha. And we're going to talk more about him in a little bit, Siddhartha Gautama, who later took the name, or was given the name the Buddha. It began about 2,500 years ago, 23 to 2,600 years ago with him. We're not sure exactly when he was born, about 500 years BCE. And he took what he was deeply schooled and practiced in the Hindu traditions, and there was something missing for him, and God called him a little more forward or on his own path, and he created some different teachings. It's about 7% of the world's population. It's about 500 million people practice Buddhism, mostly in Asia. So we're calling this Gifts of the East because they both got their start in India. And then Hinduism has largely stayed there, but as we know, here in Houston, it's worldwide. Buddhism kind of migrated east to East Asia, Korea, China, Japan, and those are the places. And there are many branches and schools on both of them. Here are some big picture things, what they share. They share the teaching of karma, that what we do matters, and that we are either working off our karma or building up some more for the next lifetime to figure out. Also, reincarnation is a shared belief upon these two religions, and they are both deeply non-dual. And this is the biggest difference between the three Western religions that we spoke of last week and these two major Eastern religions. That particularly in Christianity, there is the spiritual universe, heaven, and then there is the fallen world, which is earth, right? And they're not quite sure on how those two come together. Somebody's got to die. That's really the only way. And in these Eastern traditions, there is an understanding that all of it is one. Does that begin to sound like anything you know? You see, we are a non-dual Christian tradition in unity. So I've joked about it before that we are a Christian church with a Hindu soul. And you may or may not like that term, and I don't mean it to be, don't take it to heart if you don't like it. But it's just this idea that beneath all of the infinite expressions of God, there is one life, one love, one presence, one infinite mind that is creating. And we're a part of it. We have never been fallen. We have never been separate from the love of God, except in our own thought. So where they differ. In Buddhism, there is no deity. It's considered an atheistic religion. Did you know that? Buddha is not a god. I'll talk more about that later, too. He's a teacher, but it's pointing to divine principles. Now, in some of the more richer and complex traditions, like in Tibetan Buddhism, there are deep stories of demons and angels and saints and goddesses and all of these things, but there's an understanding that really we're making all this up. And it's all meant to bring us back home, to bring us back home to our own individual connection with Spirit. There is also no permanent self in Buddhism. And this is where we would probably differ, that I do believe, and I think that our founders taught, and most of us would agree, that there is some spark of me, not my ego and not my history in this body and with this family, but there is a part of me, my soul is maybe the word, I don't know, that is an eternal expression of God. But that belief does not exist in Buddhism. It does in Hinduism. So that's all the heady stuff, and I just want to say again, there's not much I can do in a Sunday talk to give you the deep teaching of it, but if you're interested, the two books that I'm using, well, three books that I'm using mostly for this series, Holy Envy by Barbara Brown Taylor, and our own Jill Carroll's new book, which is World Religions, A Beginner's Guide, and that venerable classic, World Religions by Houston Smith. That's what I'm mostly dipping into. So let's go into Hinduism. Here's the teaching that I wanted to bring to you today. The four wants of wants or goals in Hinduism. Houston Smith, in the opening chapters of his book, he said and what he's really great at is distilling this really complex and rich teaching into like a narrative, a story. And what Houston Smith says is what Hinduism seeks to ask is this question: what do people want? And then through all of the traditions and the yogic paths and the deep understanding and insight of the religion, they have arrived at the conclusion that you can have what you want. And so there are 4 goals or wants, and the first, that we want pleasure. We want to feel good. And in some religions, that if it feels good, that means it's suspect, right? Can I get an amen? You all know that? That if it feels good, you probably got to stay away from that. In Hinduism, there is a deep understanding that pleasure is good. Now, of course, it can be used. We're not hedonists. We're not hedonists. We're not going to seek pleasure only and at any cost. They say, if you want pleasure, great, do it intelligently. And here are some practices to keep you grounded as you seek to find the pleasure of having a human incarnation. You ever come across the Kama Sutra? I'm not going to say any more about that. We're going to teach that. But there are deep teachings that pleasure is good. And there are ways to do it wisely as part of your spiritual life, to experience a life of pleasure. The first 2 of these goals or paths are called the path of desire. And what people find is though pleasure and to do it intelligently and to get what we want and to feel it's wonderful. The self loves it, but it's not enough. There will come a time, and in this teaching, they're saying we may spend 10 lifetimes just on this path of pleasure. Some of you are like that, I see it. Some of you are like, that sounds like a good way to do it. But it may take as long as it needs for your soul to get its fill. But at some point, there will be enough. And you're going to look for something a little deeper. The next path, which is also on this path of desire, is success. That we will want to achieve something that is good. And this is a much more fulfilling and lasting experience of the good of God in form, is to create success in our lives. And it's a good thing. But it too is not fulfilling enough. These first 2 paths of desire and success are sometimes likened to toys. Now, would you ever want a child to not have toys? Can you imagine anything sadder than a childhood with no toys? Of course you want children to have toys. But is there also anything sadder than an adult that all they do is chase and play and purchase toys? That's not enough, is it? And so this is a good metaphor for us to understand that there's nothing wrong with having pleasure in our life. There's nothing wrong with achieving success. They're both really good in the Hindu tradition. And there may be a deeper calling still. So the second 2 paths, or the second 2 goals or wants, they're part of the path of renunciation, where we begin to say to self, you've had enough of that. Put down the ice cream. Today is National Ice Cream Day. I hope you all observe this sacred ritual in exactly the right way for your soul. But it is National Ice Cream Day. So we can all partake in the path of pleasure for at least 1 scoop of butter pecan. Or whatever your path to the divine is. But in the path of renunciation, the first of these 2 is duty, service. That there is something in us that knows that we've got to be more about more than just ourselves. And I don't know how the whole system of reincarnation and karma and all that work, but I just have a sense that people who find their way to unity, that this is where the center of gravity of our community is. We have people here who really want to serve. They want to use their gifts to lift others up. And it's a beautiful, beautiful path. And then in the teaching that says you can spend dozens of lifetimes deepening in this duty. Beautiful Hindu poet Rabindranath Tagore has this famous poem which I've shared with you many times, that I dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and found that life was service. I acted and found that service was joy. There's a beauty in being willing to serve being willing to give of our time, our resources, to help another, to lift someone just besides getting our own pleasure needs and success needs met. But according to Hinduism, even that will not be enough for our ultimate freedom, and that is the fourth path, liberation. Mokshi is the word. And it says, again, going back to that first question that Houston Smith brought to us, what do people want? And he says, really, we want three things. And this is where I'm going to go back to my notes. I'm telling you, there's a lot in here. We want infinite being, to be present. We want infinite being. We want infinite knowledge. We want to be able to access the understanding of the ways of this universe. And we want infinite bliss or joy. Those are the three desires of this fourth desire of freedom. We would love to live infinitely in being, in joy, in knowledge. This is what Houston Smith says. Infinite being, infinite awareness, and infinite bliss are within our reach. Even so, the most startling statement yet awaits. Not only are these goods within people's reach, says Hinduism, people already possess them. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is not here nor there. The kingdom of heaven is where? Within. This is the deep teaching of Hinduism, that everything you want already is in you. And that there are so many paths to that freedom. There's the freedom from, the freedom that everything that keeps us from our joy, from our being, and there's the freedom to, the freedom to have permission to live the life that God has given you fully. So many of us, I was just sharing with Karen, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I'm about to take some vacation. And I realized I have a little scarcity thinking about it. Because most of my professional life, I have only gotten paid if I worked, because I was a gigging musician for many, many years. And so that little belief has just kind of shown itself as I'm preparing to take this time off. That I feel like, well, do I deserve that? Am I worthy of taking vacation time? And that's the freedom to experience that which is here for us. This is a path of awakening, which now leads us into our discussion on Buddhism. It's not much of a discussion. You aren't talking back very much, so more of a one-sided conversation. This is again from Houston Smith. Actually, I want to tell this story first. Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, a real person, in somewhere between 300 and 600 years before the time of Christ in India. He was a part of the Shakya family. They were a ruling class. They lived at the foothills of the Himalayas. And there was a prophecy given to Siddhartha's father that this child that would be born, this son, would be one of two paths. He would be a universal ruler, a great beneficial ruler over all people, or he would be a great and wise spiritual sage. Well, his dad thought there's probably more money in the ruler part. And so he devised a plan that he was going to keep his son away from the ascetic teachings of Hinduism, which is the path of renunciation. He wanted to keep his son firmly in the ruling, the acquiring, all of the good stuff, right? So he never let his child, Siddhartha, see any harm or discomfort or pain in the world. He was protected to the nth degree so that he would be happy in his life of privilege and power. And he married the most beautiful young woman. They had the most perfect young son. And yet, in the heart of Siddhartha, something more was calling him. He had been given everything he wanted. As the Hindu path, the Hindu teaching tells us, we can get it all, and yet there is more. And so he snuck out of the palace one night. He had his chariot driver drive him around the city, and where he saw three things. He saw a sick person. He saw an old person. And he saw a dead body. And so suddenly came into his awareness of privilege and comfort, illness, age, and death. And his chariot driver looked at him and said, that happens to everybody. It happens to all beings. Remember, we've talked about the impermanence of form. In Unity, the way we teach it is that spirit is forever moving in and out of forms, including these. But Siddhartha was deeply troubled. And he renounced his wealth and his privilege. He cut his hair, and he became an ascetic, one who renounces the world, and wandered with his begging bowl, seeking teachers. He had two primary teachers. The first taught him through conscious awareness, you can move to the no-thingness within. And he was there for a few years, and this teacher saw his skills and his depth. He said, would you stay here and be my partner in this teaching? And he said, no, there is more. And the second teacher taught him another way of conscious awareness that would take him to that place that lay between the unconscious and the conscious. And this teacher also said, you can be the greatest of us. And he said, no, there's more than this as well. So he began to wander in what we would call extreme asceticism. The story says that for 6 years, he lived on 1 grain of rice and 1 drop of water a day. Now, that's a diet I'm not willing to go on. But that's the legend. And at the end of these 6 years, he was, as you could imagine, skinny. He said that his ribs were bursting forth. His body looked like he was about to die. And he realized there must be more. And so he goes into a village and he meets a young woman, Sujaya. And he asks for food, and she gives him a bowl of milk and a jar of honey. And he drank the milk and ate the honey, and he was strengthened. Honey is good. Carbs are good. And he bathed in the river. And then he went to sit under the Bodhi tree on a grass mat. A Bodhi tree is a fig tree that grows in that part of the world. And he determined that he would just sit and wait for this more that he had been searching for. So he sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. In some tellings of the story, it was 6 days. In some, it was 49 days. Taking no food, no words. And he awoke from that time of meditation, and he knew. He knew the nature of reality here and the nature of reality beyond. The 4 noble truths are what first revealed from Siddhartha Buddha. Suffering. Life is always involves suffering in obvious and subtle forms. Even when these things are good, even when things are good, we always feel an undercurrent of anxiety and uncertainty inside. His second noble truth is the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is craving, egoic desire, fundamental ignorance. We suffer because of our mistaken belief that we're separate, independent, that we are an individualized I, separate from the all. This painful and futile struggle to maintain the delusion of ego is known as samsara, the cyclic existence, which is reincarnation and karma. The third thing that he came to is that there is an end to suffering. The good news is that our obscurations are temporary, and when, like passing clouds that obscure the sun, our enlightened nature, which is always present within us, therefore suffering can end because the clouds can be purified and the awakened mind is always available to us. And fourth of his noble truths is there is a path. By living ethically, practicing meditation, and developing wisdom, we can take exactly the same journey to enlightenment and freedom from suffering that Buddhas do. We too can wake up. This is from Houston Smith's book. When the people carried their puzzlement to the Buddha himself, the answer he gave an identity to it was his entire message. Are you a god? They asked. No. Are you an angel? No. Are you a saint? He answered, no. Well, then what are you? The Buddha answered, I am awake. Are you ready to wake up? Are you ready to stop fighting yourself? Are you ready to lay the burden down of your separate existence and trust that the Holy Spirit has brought you here for a purpose? You are filled with divine intention. The life of your dreams is already inside you. We've got to get free of all of those false desires and beliefs that keep us small. Pam Lewis is continuing to just support me so beautifully on my path, and she gave me a gift of this beautiful new book by Tara Brach, a Buddhist teacher. This is in one of the short little essays. Hundreds of years ago in Japan, a Zen master named Sono was known far and wide for her wisdom. Many came to her to find healing for their bodies, their minds, their hearts, but no matter what their pain or affliction, Sono offered one simple remedy. Every day repeat this mantra: thank you for everything. I have no complaints whatsoever. And as the story goes, those who took her advice to heart found happiness and healing. One small caveat there: I don't think we have to be thankful for the difficult things that happen in the exterior conditioned world, but be thankful for what it brings in us. In our Western tradition, particularly in Christianity, we have a lot of battle imagery, right? Onward, Christian soldiers. Remember that one? Marching as to war. This is a legacy of our dualistic inheritance, that there is an enemy and we've got to fight to win. But if you're looking for victory in your life, that means you have one of two options. You'll be victorious or you will be defeated. And what the gifts from these beautiful Eastern traditions offer us, what they offer us is that there is no fight except the one within yourself. And you can let it go. Stop fighting. I have fought so much of my life. Fought who I am. Fought by the own acceptance of this is the way God made me. I fought so long. So weary. Oneness, non-duality, it doesn't seek to fight, it harmonizes it. Everything works together for our good. Do you hear me? Everything. Stop fighting. This is a poem. It's actually an interpretation, a very creative interpretation of an ancient Sufi poem by Hafez, by Daniel Ladinsky. This is called Now is the Time. Now is the time to know that all that you do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truce with yourself and with God? Now is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just a child's training wheels to be laid aside when you would finally live with veracity and love. Hafez is a divine envoy whom the beloved has written a holy message upon. My dear, please tell me, why do you still throw sticks at your heart and at God? What is in that sweet voice inside you that incites you to fear? Now is the time for the world to know that your every thought and action is sacred. This is the time for you to compute the impossibility that there is nothing but grace. Now is the season to know that everything that you do is sacred. Would you join me in prayer? So we lay down our burden, the burden of our own divided mind, of our own self-judgment and criticism, and the judgment and criticism of others. We lay it down. We stop fighting anyone or anything, and we surrender. Infinite God, infinite presence, we are one with you. And we accept this freedom, this awakening now. Willing to let go of anything that is unlike the truth of light, of love, of peace, of joy. Show us, God, even in our anger and distress, that beneath it there is an opening to our wholeness. Even in our grief and our sadness, there is an invitation, an opening to wholeness. And in that place of absolute unity with you, God, we no longer have to fight. We walk in grace. We walk in love. We walk in power. Show us. Teach us. We are listening. We are willing. We pray this in the name and the nature of the indwelling Christ. Amen. If no one has told you today they love you, I love you. God bless you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.